All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the most based and reactionary show on the African continent. Yes, folks, we are back. The original A-team is back. I'm here, Scott here, D-Dog is back in the house. Russell, the based, is here as well. And we're ready to rip shit up.
Okay. That should be his new name. D-Dog, how you doing? I was just thinking, you said Russell the Based. I'm D-Dog, obviously, but maybe he should be Sir Russell the Based. That might be good. But I'm doing fantastic. Like Sir Russell the Based. But anyways, yeah, I'm doing fantastic. For anyone who probably, you might or might not be able to tell, but I'm in a new location. So I've moved, and since our hiatus, I have moved and bequeathed a son unto the world. So I have new progeny. So I just had a son. He's 3 months old, and life's good.
Correct. You see, like myself and Dylan are such great minds. And great minds think alike. So I too have actually relocated and moved. And I too have a 3-month-old daughter that we will still go into negotiations as to whether she shall be Dylan's son's betrothal.
Yes, exactly. It still has to iron out some details. There's some issues of titles and who will get what land and so on and so forth. But it's in the works.
Yes, exactly. It's not easy working through all the white privilege in this, arrangement. So
it's a lot of white privilege to work through, man.
Yeah, a lot. So, Russell, how you been during this hiatus, my friend? I mean, my brother.
Well, I was doing well until this lockdown, and then the last 5 weeks has been incredibly challenging mentally. I've had to. And resistance I wasn't expecting from people, probably patched up a couple of relationships and what have you over disagreements of this lockdown. And but in other news, I think I'm going to be a lot more chilled out now because I finally got my hands on some iron. So I'm lifting again. So I'm actually a lot happier. I'm in a much better mood place these days as well.
Yeah, Russell's levels of testosterone were dropping quite fast during the lockdown, so he had to, raise those levels of testosterone by, you can't be based, Sir Russell the Based, and not have massive levels of testosterone. So,
testosterone is well known for causing depression, low testosterone. So,
yeah, exactly.
I'm chilled.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why most libertarians are always on antidepressants and stuff. Anyway, so Russell, we have a very interesting topic that we are going to be discussing this evening. It is going to be lockdown based and something that has been quite an annoyance to all of us, I'm sure. All of us Christians, but more specifically to Russell, we are going to be talking about the Christians, the average huggable Christians' reaction to the lockdown and how incredibly wrong they got it and how incredibly wrong they've been about this government for many, many, many years. Anyway, I think I'll just hand it over to Russell because this is a issue that is, like he said in his introduction, is quite important to him. So take it away, Russell.
Yeah. One of the things with Christianity, government and authority, and how they responded to this lockdown was a significant eye-opener for me. I found myself on the minority view, in the view of what I'm saying, amongst my sort of Christian peers, I found myself on the side of the minority, the alternate view, the general narrative by that you'll get pushed a lot by Christian leaders and that would be, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, that it would be usually the whole sort of Romans 13 situation. Yeah, so I'll just read Romans 13. Yeah, I'm reading from the New King James Version. It says, "Let every soul be subject to the government by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to do what is good, you will have praise from the same." Now, that is that is usually thrown out there when we have a situation in a country where a government is where people start questioning government's motives. Can we trust our government? Are they above board? What should we do? What should our response be? This is what those sort of questions. When one asks why Christian leaders and leaders, specifically of large churches and institutional churches, etc., do this. After thinking of it for some time, I thought it would be. It's very, very. In a way, it's quite similar to the corporate South Africa, the business South Africa's response to it, which is to pretty much get along to go along. It's kind of like that thing where they say, okay, well, we'll just appease them now, and hopefully they'll just leave us alone. It's like it's an old saying, that old African saying. What is it? How's it go? Feeding the crocodile, hoping it'll eat you last. It's a situation like that. It's quite similar to what we have amongst big business and other sort of social institutions. Kind of like just hoping that they'll somehow just be left alone eventually. And this is actually. It's actually quite similar to Jesus's time, if you think of it. The Romans, who were the governing authority in Judea, actually used the Pharisees, all right, to maintain order amongst the people. The Pharisees were seen as the authority given by the Romans, delegated authority essentially to the Pharisees to maintain order. I think when Jesus came along, although Jesus wasn't interested in replacing any sort of authoritative structures or anything, but when Jesus came along, he threatened the Pharisees' authority, and that was going to kind of put them in a politically bad situation with the ruling Romans, who were overruling them at the time, and B, it was going to lose favor with the people. Jesus didn't want to. He had no quest for political power, but the fact that he spoke so much truth undermined their authority. He spoke clearly to the people. He alerted the people. He trained. He worked into discipling, preaching and teaching, and speaking the way he did. Jesus threatened the Pharisees' authority. And it's kind of like we found ourselves in Christianity the last, actually for millennia. Actually, it's not a new thing. It's not denomination present. It's interdenominational. It's across churches. Is that we end up with a centrally planned Christianity where authoritative figures. It's like, and people actually people use the authority figures as to defer responsibility onto. So what I'm getting at is, in a situation, somebody who is part of a particular church movement or church, they'll instantly go with what their leaders say, okay, without thinking about. It's easy. Both Christians actually want centrally planned Christianity because they can defer the responsibility onto church leaders. and onto church institutions. So whatever that church or institution or authority or leader says, they take that verbatim and they run with it, because it's easier that way for them. They don't need to take responsibility in their own lives or anything around it. They don't need it actually takes too much effort to not follow or to actually question it. It's not very common. So I know that I started off reading Romans 13, but okay, well, fine. Russell, then what is your view on authority? Should be the next question. Okay, well, the way I viewed Romans 13, you can't, those verses in Romans 13 are very much, not so much about their government, all right, of the day, all right, or who your rulers are. It's about authority more than anything else. It's not about the rulers and who they are and what they do. It's about authority, primarily. And the Bible speaks so much about authority. I just wanted to, I've got a note here that I'd just like to share with you with regards my view, which I know took a note down here on my notepad here. Throughout the Bible, it's pretty clear that there is always authority. So for me, authority is like a golden thread running through society. We all need to be in line and hold each other to account. We are all accountable before God, being the ultimate authority. All authority is delegated authority, which flows from God via leaders to followers and to all in society. It is all in society's responsibility to hold others in society accountable before the law and before the ultimate authority, who is God. Sometimes rulers are out of line and must be brought in line. Sometimes it's the ordinary people who are out of line and must be brought into account. We are all responsible to keep each other accountable and in submission. So that's how I see how one is to view biblical authority. I'll give a couple of scriptures here. So there's numerous ones. There's also where one of the verses one of the stories is where the Roman centurion comes to Jesus and he's asking him to heal his servant, and he says, "No, don't come. I am a person of authority. Say the word and I'll be healed." And Jesus compliments the centurion and he says, "I have not seen such great faith in all Israel." Okay, that's because he recognized being under authority. Here in Matthew 20 verse 25, it says, "But Jesus called them to himself and said, 'You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant.'" So in that verse, Jesus is saying, there's going to always be people in authority over, and you're going to be in authority over others. But you're not there to lord it over them. You're not there to, everybody is in authority. And hasn't had, the only reason why people have authority is because it's been delegated to them. Okay? So, in a sense, we're all equal before the law, but we have to, for authority to work in society, there's that golden thread by which we all need to line up. So it's like you cannot have equality before the law without hierarchy. The whole thing forms together and is held together. So hierarchy and equality, okay, we're all under God, but there's hierarchy at the same time. It's like a between a husband and a wife, all right? It is very much the authority is delegated to the husband, but it's not there to lord it over the wife, okay? But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it doesn't issue the husband with a blank check to do as he pleases just because he's in authority over her, okay? It's exactly the same thing in governments and rulers of the day. They don't have a blank check, all right? Nobody who is under authority, it's all delegated to them. Nobody gets a blank check. If everybody can understand that they themselves in authority don't have a blank check, and the people below them take the responsibility to keep them to account and say you don't have a blank check, then society works. If it doesn't, it starts falling apart. So for me, a lot of Christians can't seem to see this equality and hierarchy thing being a part of how life is supposed to work, the God's design for authority. It flows from him all the way down. Everybody's in line. That's when things work. When things go out of the line, when the government rulers go out of line, it's the people's responsibility to bring them in line. When the people go out of line, it's the government rulers to bring constantly in order, because we're all under the law of God. We're all under the law. Get what I'm saying? So if you authority, it actually means so. Now it says here, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. I'll just leave it there. Now that you know how this authority sort of thing works, all right, when you read that, you understand it in a different way. You don't read it like a lens of delegated authority. You can't read it as absolute. I mean, you cannot. There's just simply no ways that, according to Romans 13, that the government. No ways, and a lot of Christian leaders have come quite close to issuing in this, quite close often to kind of saying, no, you must just submit to these rulers. It's not our business. It's not our place to criticize them. It's not our place. They'll give an account one day and all that sort of thing. It's our Christian duty to bring the rulers and the governments to account. You cannot let. It's the same thing. In any sort of hierarchical relationship, you simply have to bring people to account. Because if you understand what delegated authority is, and I cannot hold to a view that issues a blank check. That's pretty much all I've got to say on the matter. Did you guys want to comment?
Yeah, Russell, that's 100% correct. I agree with that 100%. So basically, what you're saying is that, in a nutshell, that, Christian leaders at this stage, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are kind of afraid to tell their congregation to, speak up against government or whatever it is, because government is not doing God's work. The most diabolical part of this whole thing, Russell, is that this lockdown is not really the first time this government has not done God's work. They've never done God's work. They've never been a godly government. This is the whole thing. So if you are a Christian, okay, and you do not speak up against this government, you cannot call yourself a Christian. You cannot.
See, the thing is as well, Scott, that people that can't seem to get into their heads, Christians can't seem to get into their heads for some reason that most of the time, in fact, throughout history, your civil authorities are generally pretty wicked as a default. You've got to view them as wicked. It would be safer most of the time to view them as wicked, and if not as wicked, with extreme skepticism. And the way I saw Christians worshipping Cyril Ramaphosa, I did my nut. I let them have it. I told them
don't worry,
exactly
we all did our nut. Don't worry. Captain South Africa. Thank you, Mr. President. Dylan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting hearing about this, and I largely agree with what Russell was saying. And I guess I'm of the opinion that you can be a Christian and be like, Saint Cyril, save us, but you're very misguided and you're not helping, to say the least. Looking back at history and this issue of hierarchy and order. So in the Middle Ages, and perhaps even before that, I believe this is a very ancient idea. It's called the Great Chain of Being, and all creation is sort of arranged in an order. And there was this saint, I think it was Saint Dionysius, and he And other people in the Middle Ages after him, like Thomas Aquinas and whatnot, had this concept called the Great Chain of Being, where at the top you have God, and below that you have the seraphim, the cherubim, the different orders of angels, the saints, and then you get down to the earthly realm, the kings, the lords and the knights, so on and so forth. So you look at nature both here on earth and in the supernatural realm, there is a clear hierarchy of order. But like Russell was saying, the offices, right? The offices, not the person, but the specific office has a legitimacy to it. There's a place for a king. There's a place for, a lord. There's a place for the husband to be the head of his household and the mother to rule over the children. But that isn't to say that you can have an undeserving person within one of those roles, right? So, for instance, if we look at the Bible, you have Saul, right, who was declared king of Israel, and he was ordained by the prophet himself, right? He said, "Yes, you are the literally God-ordained king of the Hebrews." And what ended up happening? He was eventually gotten rid of because as essentially a divine chastisement for him falling off the path, right? So, it was right for Saul to be obeyed. It was right for him to hold that authority, but, God giveth and taketh away, right? So, and the reason he lost his position in Israel as the rightful king is because he didn't hold up his end of the bargain. He didn't know his own place in the great chain of being, right? So he is the king, but who's above him, right? God, essentially. So everybody has a boss, even kings and presidents and, publicly elected officials. And, we would do well to recognize that, yes, although the office may have legitimacy to some extent, nobody is above reproach. And just as, the Lord brought chastisement upon Saul and ended up, having him lose his kingdom and going nutty and paranoid and, having the kingdom of Israel itself split up and then be conquered by the Assyrians and then the Babylonians for falling off the way, so too with the ANC, So I think that's just sort of the takeaway. There's biblical precedent for this. Yes, we're not saying, all authority is illegitimate. Authority is legitimate, but the wielder of the power, which is really what it is, can be unworthy and a real son of the bitch and shouldn't be there. So
yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. The thing is, we all respect hierarchy, but the thing is, we're all in there's hierarchy, but there's equality because there's equality below the law. So a lot of an equality before God. And a lot of people just can't seem to grasp that those two work in unison. You take one away, the whole thing falls apart.
Well, isn't that the Christian idea of justice, the actual Christian idea of justice, not like social justice or anything, but isn't it that the Christian idea of justice?
Like I say, I'm not quite sure exactly in what sense you mean justice, but. I'm not quite sure what you mean by justice. I know about how it's the Christian view of authority, and obviously you would have judgment and justice via that chain of command for sure. Because sometimes you would need to bring everybody in line is the justice element.
Correct.
Well. So
that's what I'm getting at. Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of my Christian brethren I got into because they hadn't actually taken time to think about things about where does authority come from. If you understand where authority comes from and you understand the idea, like Dylan said, is what did you call it, the hierarchy of being, or what is it?
The great chain of being.
A great chain of being. Now if you have an understanding of the great chain of being, and you go and read Romans 13, you view it through a completely different lens now, don't you?
Precisely, yeah.
You see, now that's my lens I'm reading Romans 13 through, and that's why I'm not reading it as a piece of paper and as it's written. I'm reading it through a particular lens. Whether I call that scripture interpreting scripture, but other people will say, oh, you're overcomplicating, or you're reading too much into it, or something like that. I don't know, but I do not believe I am theologically out of bounds here.
Definitely not. I don't think any honest Christian would well, not honest. I don't think anyone would deny that. Yeah, learned Christian would deny that. I think the problem is there's far too much nominal Christianity going on, and I think that's the concerning part. But anyway, I think you think we've settled this once and for all, Russell. You've gone
pretty much
shot them with the axe of basement.
I'll just say that people enjoy if people don't want to take their role in the authority structures in the hierarchy of being, because they don't want to because that actually takes real faith. It actually takes real faith to want to hold people to account and maintain the order that God has put in. That takes faith. Yeah, and a lot of people, that it's just too much effort for most Christians.
Yeah, because it's not going to be an easy thing to do. That's going to take faith to do that. Anyway, I think we've done with that one. Do you guys have anything that you want to add?
I'm done. I've said everything.
No, I think that sounds good, man. Great. Sounds good. I guess the only thing I would say is that yes, it's important for people who are fans of the regime to keep in mind that from a biblical point of view, don't take our word for it. The Bible's full of examples of kings being dethroned by God or even by foreign powers as a punishment. Like the Lord, will send a pestilence of Assyrians on your house if you don't toe the line, essentially. And or like the king of the Moabites, right? He was attacking the Israelites, and then what did he end up doing? He was a big fat slob, and then he got stabbed by that one dude. I can't remember. I think his name was Ehud. He was one of the judges from the Bible. And so you could say, but he was the king. Well, yeah, but he was also a real SOB and deserved to go. So he did. Yeah, exactly. So I mean,
anyway,
it's both and. It's not either or. It's both and. It's a false dialectic to say, oh, we have authority, we always need to listen to it, or no, it's all bullshit. We don't have to listen to this because they're corrupt. It's both, right? So you have authority, but you have to be deserving of the office. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for people to hold both of those views in their minds, because they're kind of almost conflicting, and it's generally difficult for people to hold two conflicting opinions.
That's what if Scott Fitzgerald, he said, he had a famous saying where he said, the sign of true maturity is being able to hold two seemingly conflicting ideas in your head at the same time and maintain the ability to function.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it on that one. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Remember to always, always, always stay reactionary out there, because
God wills it.
God wills it.
God wills it.